Right now, millions of gamers are playing as her in Civilization 7. They're commanding her fleets, negotiating trade deals, and dominating the Mediterranean. But here's what's absolutely wild, most of them have no idea that Sayyida al-Hurra was real. And not just real, she was arguably more powerful than any pirate you've ever heard of. Forget Blackbeard. Forget Captain Jack Sparrow. This woman controlled half the Mediterranean Sea, negotiated directly with Ottoman sultans, and never, not once, bowed to European powers trying to colonize North Africa. Her name literally means, lady who is free and independent. And in the 1500s, when women couldn't even own property in most of Europe, she was running an empire from the sea. So why did history try to erase her? And why is she suddenly everywhere in 2026? Buckle up, because this story is about to rewrite everything you thought you knew about pirates, power, and who gets to be called a queen. Let's set the scene. It's 1492. Christopher Columbus has just discovered America, which means Europe is about to go absolutely insane with colonial ambitions. But there's a problem. Spain and Portugal don't just want the Americas. They want North Africa. They want the Mediterranean trade routes. They want to crush Islamic power in the region and establish Christian dominance. Enter the Spanish Inquisition's knock-on effect. Hundreds of thousands of Muslims and Jews are being expelled from Spain, their homes burned, their families torn apart. This is the world Sayyida al-Hurra was born into, a world where her people were under siege, where survival meant fighting back. Her birth name was Aisha, and she was born into Moroccan nobility around 1485 in the Emirate of Chefchaouen. But nobility meant nothing if you couldn't defend it. And Aisha? She was about to become a weapon.
The corsair routes converge here, at the straits.
And the Portuguese patrols are weakest here.
Precisely, we strike at dawn.
Here's where it gets personal. When Sayyida was a teenager, she married the ruler of Tetuan, a coastal city that had become a refuge for Muslims fleeing Spanish persecution. Her husband, Al-Mandri, was older, experienced, and controlled a strategic port. But this wasn't some passive political marriage. Sayyida immediately started learning statecraft, naval warfare, and Mediterranean politics. She wasn't content to be a decorative wife, she was studying the enemy. And the enemy was Spain and Portugal, who were capturing Muslim and Jewish refugees, enslaving them, stealing their wealth, and terrorizing coastal communities. So Sayyida and her husband made a decision that would change history. They would fight fire with fire. They would become corsairs, privateers who attacked Spanish and Portuguese ships in retaliation. But here's the thing, Sayyida wasn't just supporting this strategy. Within years, she was leading it. When her husband died in 1515, everyone expected her to remarry quietly or fade into the background. Instead, she took total control of Tetuan and became the undisputed pirate queen of the Western Mediterranean.
Surround them! Board and seize the prize! Gestapo!
Now, let's talk about what being a pirate queen actually meant in the 1500s, because this wasn't just about ships and swords. Sayyida al-Hurra built a sophisticated naval empire. She commanded fleets of ships that terrorized Spanish and Portuguese vessels, capturing cargo, freeing enslaved Muslims and Jews, and redistributing wealth back to North African communities. But she was also a master diplomat. She formed an alliance with Auric Reis, you might know him as Barbarossa, who controlled the eastern Mediterranean from Algiers. Together, they essentially divided the Mediterranean Sea. He controlled the east, she controlled the west. Two Muslim rulers coordinating attacks on European colonial powers. Spain and Portugal were terrified. They couldn't expand their trade routes. They couldn't safely transport gold from the Americas. And they couldn't stop her. Why? Because Sayyida wasn't just a raider. She was legitimate. She governed a city. She collected taxes. She negotiated treaties. European powers had to treat her as a head of state, even as she was capturing their ships. But here's the part that makes her truly extraordinary. In 1541, Sayyida al-Hurra did something no woman of her era, Muslim, Christian, or otherwise, had done. She married the Sultan of Morocco, Ahmad al-Wadisi. But she refused to go to him. Think about that for a second. A sultan, one of the most powerful men in North Africa, wanted to marry her. And she said, essentially, sure, but I'm not leaving my city. If you want to marry me, you come to me. And he did. The wedding ceremony was held in Tétouan, on her territory, under her terms. This was unheard of. Royal brides were always brought to the husband's court. But Sayyida had too much power to be moved. She was governing Tétouan, commanding fleets, and controlling Western Mediterranean trade. She couldn't be replaced. So the Sultan came to her, married her in her city, and she became Queen of Morocco while still ruling Tétouan independently. She was literally running two territories at once. Name another woman in the 1500s who did that. I'll wait.
Our harbor thrives. Free.
Yes, my lady.
So why don't we know her name the way we know Blackbeard or Henry Morgan? Here's the uncomfortable truth. European colonizers wrote the history books, and they weren't about to celebrate a Muslim woman who humiliated their empires for decades. When European historians documented the Barbary corsairs, they framed them as savages and terrorists, conveniently ignoring that these were defensive responses to European aggression, slavery, and colonization. Sayyida's name was deliberately erased or minimized. When she was mentioned at all, she was called a pirate, as if that was a dirty word, but when European men did the exact same thing, they were called privateers or explorers. Francis Drake attacked Spanish ships and he got knighted. Sayyida attacked Spanish ships and she got erased from mainstream history. And for centuries, that's where she stayed, buried in Arabic sources, mentioned briefly in Moroccan oral histories, but absent from Western education. Until now. Because in 2026, something changed. Civilization 7 made her a playable leader, and suddenly millions of people are asking, who is this woman? Why haven't I heard of her? Let's talk about what made her strategy so brilliant. Sayyida wasn't just attacking random ships for gold. She was running a calculated economic warfare campaign. Every Spanish or Portuguese ship she captured was a blow to their colonial expansion. Every enslaved person she freed was a rescue operation and a propaganda victory. She was systematically disrupting European supply chains while simultaneously strengthening North African economies. The wealth from captured ships was redistributed, some went to her government, some went to her fleet, and some went to refugee communities fleeing European persecution. She was Robin Hood with a navy. But she was also a shrewd politician. She maintained diplomatic relationships with the Ottoman Empire, which gave her legitimacy and military support. She negotiated with European powers when it benefited her, proving she could play the political game as well as any king. And she did all of this while managing the internal politics of Morocco, which was facing its own succession crises and tribal conflicts. She was fighting a war on multiple fronts, at sea, in diplomacy, and in court politics, and she was winning. But like all great stories, this one has a complicated ending. In 1542, just 1 year after her marriage to the Sultan, Morocco experienced a political upheaval. The Wadisi dynasty, her husband's family, was overthrown by the Saadi dynasty. Sayyida lost her position as Queen of Morocco. And shortly after, she was deposed as governor of Tétouan by her son-in-law in a political coup. After nearly 3 decades of ruling the Western Mediterranean, her reign ended not in battle, but in political betrayal. She disappeared from historical records around 1542. We don't know exactly when or how she died. Some sources say she lived in quiet retirement. Others suggest she may have been imprisoned or exiled. The historical record goes silent, which is perhaps the cruelest irony of all. A woman who commanded fleets and negotiated with sultans simply vanishes. But here's what they couldn't erase: her legacy. For nearly 30 years, she proved that a woman could rule, could fight, could win against the most powerful empires of her time.
Yes, fleet command activated. Diplomacy is key, just like the books say. This is history coming alive.
So why does Sayyida al-Hurra matter in 2026? Because her story destroys so many myths we've been taught. The myth that women in Islamic societies were always oppressed and powerless. The myth that pirates were just lawless criminals. The myth that European colonization was inevitable or unopposed. Sayyida proves that resistance existed, that women led it, and that for decades, they won. Her inclusion in Civilization 7 isn't just representation, it's a correction of history. It's saying, this woman deserves to be remembered alongside Elizabeth I, Suleiman the Magnificent, and every other leader we celebrate from that era. And the timing is perfect, because we're living in a moment where people are demanding more complete, more honest histories. We're questioning whose stories get told and whose get buried. We're recognizing that pirate is a political label applied by the powerful to those who resist them. Sayyida al-Hurra wasn't a criminal. She was a freedom fighter, a ruler, a strategic genius who used the tools available to her to protect her people. Here's what you need to take away from this story. Sayyida al-Hurra commanded respect from sultans and struck fear into European empires. She governed cities, commanded fleets, freed enslaved people, and refused to be anything less than free and independent, which is literally what her name means. For 30 years, she was one of the most powerful people in the Mediterranean, and history tried to forget her. But she's back. And this time, millions of people are learning her name, playing as her, and asking why they were never taught about her in school. That's the power of representation. That's why stories matter. If this video opened your eyes to a piece of history you never knew existed, smash that subscribe button because we're uncovering forgotten histories every single week. Drop a comment telling me what other erased historical figures you want to see exposed. Share this with someone who needs to know that women have been leading revolutions, commanding armies, and reshaping history for centuries, even when the textbooks tried to hide it. Sayyida al-Hurra ruled the seas. Don't let them bury her twice.